Hey, it's Chris and Cadence. Cadence wanted to be in the video. All right. I am here with Avigation Pro. I've kind of hit a career milestone, and I wanted to put an announcement up on the website that after 19 years as a professional pilot, I have paid my student loan debt off in full. So we are completely debt free, except for the mortgage. But the student loan debt has been paid off, and here is proof. Welcome, William. Congratulations. Your student loans with Great Lakes are paid off. These were a combination of government subsidized and unsubsidized loans, but there it is. Stafford loan, U.S. Department of Education, balance zero, paid in full. This happened about a month ago to the day. So it would have been the day that the payment auto drafted, but we were in a position to be able to call them up and make a online transaction and just pay the thing off in full. Student loan debt and training cost is a big deal for professional pilots, and it was a big deal for us. And so I kind of wanted to share with you how we got here, and I'll give you the rundown. I've been flying professionally since 2004, so that's a 15-year history as a professional aviator. I am 36 years old. Cadence is one of 5 siblings, and my wife Jennifer and I have been married for 12 years. During that time, I've been the sole breadwinner. So on a pilot salary, providing for 7 and working towards paying debt down. Now we're finally here. So personally, at 36 years old, I feel like that's kind of late to the game. But for many years, pilot salaries were suppressed. There was a big turnaround beginning roughly in 2014. So we can talk about that. But that's a little bit of our history. And then I've got notes here that I kind of want to go over to give the rundown for how all this happened. So I'm going to shrink me down. There we go. All right, so back to 2001, graduated high school, searched for pilot training options. I did some things right and I did some things wrong. I was able to begin pilot training and officially full-time in the fall semester of 2001. I did this at Georgia Aviation Technical College in Eastman, Georgia. The school has now been kind of taken over by the Middle Georgia college system. And at the time, they were still on their own entity, the aviation school. And I was doing a joint enrollment program. But I was able to keep costs under control by staying in-state. In-state tuition is a big deal. Community college is a big deal. Did not go to a university at the time. Middle Georgia offered an associate's program, which I did do joint enrollment to complete an associate's of applied science. And the bulk of my cost went towards housing and flight training, the actual hourly operating cost of the airplane. We talk about that all the time here at AvigationPro.com because that is the number one single most expensive aspect of flight training, the hourly operating cost on the airplane. Reducing that will help you keep your overall cost under control more than any other aspect. Other things I did, low-cost apartment. Eastman wasn't a real expensive place to live. I got a $400 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment, and I got a roommate immediately. Kept a roommate the whole time I was there. I worked part-time the whole time I was there, with some exceptions, some gaps. But for the most part, I was doing what I could to keep my spending money taken care of. I had some help from family with housing cost and with the cost of the flight training, and the state was paying for tuition, books, and fees through the scholarships. So working, getting a roommate, and going to the best cost scenario, the best option that was available. Those are the things that helped me keep costs down. Now, opportunities for improvement. Could have done way better. The most important thing a pilot in training can do to keep costs under control is to not go well beyond the required number of flight hours to get certified. This is a problem for many people. And it was a problem for me. I'll admit that at the time I was licensed as a private pilot. In my logbook, if I look back, it was at hour number 68. So the FAA requires 40. It took me 68. Roughly 2 to 3 of those hours were logged when I was in high school, so they don't really count. You have to start over when you begin a program, so I don't really dock myself for those. But at, say, even 60 hours, that's a good 20 hours over. And this is where people really run into issues where the costs get out of control. And the typical pattern is for student pilots to kind of fumble through the student pilot stage. And then as you advance into higher levels of training, instrument, commercial, and so on, you get to a point where you get very, very good at knocking out lessons and making sure that you're, satisfying all the requirements in the time allotted. And that is an area where many people have room for improvement, myself included. And that's kind of the heart and soul of what we do at Avigation Pro, is help people address the early stages of flight training like a professional in a very systematic way to keep those costs under control. So did a lot of things right, made some mistakes along the way. 2004, graduated. I graduated with an Associate's of Applied Science from Middle Georgia and all of my certs from Georgia Aviation Technical College. I was a commercial multi-engine pilot with a certified flight instructor certificate. I was invited back to work as an intern, and during that internship, I was allowed to work at the school's expense toward gaining my multi-engine instructor and instrument instructor certificates. I was responsible for the cost for the check ride. They provided me with the airplane, which is huge. So that was another big win. Okay, when I graduated, at that time in 2004, I had roughly $13,000 in student loan debt. And there's typically a 6-month grace period with student loans. So you graduate, and the lenders understand that you're not going to jump right into a good paying job. So they give you a little bit of time. And for me, it took longer than 6 months from graduation. I did roughly 9 months worth of internships. And then it took me beyond that 9-month point, probably another 5 months or 6 months to get a salaried position where I had steady income and could begin making payments on those student loans. This was devastating and very difficult for me at the time. I had to call the bank at the 6-month mark and say, guys, I don't have any money. I don't know what I'm going to do. This is frustrating. 2004 job market for pilots was not similar to the 2019 job market for pilots. And I struggled along for a few months. Thankfully, the bank extended a 1-year additional grace period. There was some paperwork involved, and this was an unusual exception, and I think it was just a different time. Thankfully, by the spring of 2005, I got into my first real, what I call real corporate job. It was a salaried position flying a King Air 200. Now, even though I was in a salaried position, single, salaries weren't very good. My starting salary way back then was under $30,000, but it grew in pretty good chunks. $4,000, $5,000 salary increases. So over the course of the next 5 to 7 years, maybe it's probably what it took me to get to $50,000. In that time, we got married and started having children. As I already mentioned, we have 5. And with the exception of the first year and Jennifer working part-time during the second year of marriage, I've been the sole breadwinner. I can say, looking back, though, beginning making payments on that first round of student loans in 2005, we were able to completely crush them in less than 24 months. So we were laser beam focused, and we paid off $13,000 worth of debt very quickly. So even though I was delayed at the start, it was good. And so early in our marriage and early in my career, we spent several years being debt free. Now, I made a commitment to myself at the time that I would get my 4-year degree, because I understood that if you want to go to the top of this industry, you've got to have a 4-year degree. There are operators that just aren't going to hire undegreed pilots. Now, the demand is higher today, so it's probably easier to get into a really attractive job without one than it was back in 2004. But if you want to go past a certain level, that's kind of been the rule throughout the history of the industry. So I always knew that I would return to school to get that 4-year degree taken care of. But I made a deal that I just would not do it until my salary was high enough that I felt confident that I could make the payments on the student loans that I would require to go back through the second round of education. Step I will mention in there is in 2008, I got my ATP. The requirements for getting an ATP airline transport pilot certificate have changed since then. Thankfully, back then it was about a $500 check ride and a day in the company Baron. I did it in a light twin Baron aircraft. I talked my employer into allowing me to use the airplane for that training event or testing event. And it was one of the most generous things that they did for me while I was there. So I was extremely appreciative, and that was a big blessing. Flash forward to 2004. At that point, I'm starting to make pretty decent money. But at that time, I'm doing two, dual roles. I think I've mentioned in other videos, I was a project manager for a construction company. And I was also running a flight department for that same company. So we were operating a twin Cessna 414, a twin Cessna 340, and a Cessna 172. So all that was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of hard work. And that's the point where I knew, hey, I need to go to the next level in my aviation career. And I'm probably going to have a lot better opportunity at doing that if I get this 4-year degree taken care of. So with the salary being better and that the understanding that things were starting to pick up, I made the decision to jump back into a 4-year training program. So I considered whether I should take training in aviation or outside of aviation. And I've had this conversation with many people. Given any opportunity, I would have probably preferred to do a non-aviation track. But when I looked at what I had and what the requirements were to complete the different degree programs that I considered, Embry-Riddle's online training program was the best option. I found out that they actually awarded 31 credit hours for my ATP. That airline transport pilot certificate was so valuable that it knocked out essentially a year's worth of training. So going into a aeronautics program put me basically a year ahead of where I would have been if I jumped into some of the other programs I considered, like math or history or business. So having studied the situation and come to that realization, I enrolled in Embry-Riddle in the summer of 2014 with no plans to finish the program quickly. I knew I wanted to finish. I knew it would be kind of a long-term thing. I had about a year and a half to 2 years worth of courses to complete if I were a full-time student. But I took my time and drug that out. And so it was December of 2017 when I finished my capstone course. The topic of my capstone course was AvigationPro.com and how we have opportunity to improve efficiencies in flight training. So that was a pretty exciting project that relates directly to the website and what I'm doing here with this channel. And in fact, if you're interested, let me know. I'll send you the final paper. It's about 30 or 40 pages worth of work. So anyway, graduated and boom, now we're set looking at the next round of student loans. So December 27, Embry-Riddle online degree completed, aeronautics degree, and roughly $15,000 in student loan debt. So we started paying, again, Stafford loans. I think it's, I don't know, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, whatever. Our handler, I don't know the terms, exactly what it's called, but it was My Great Lakes was like our service provider that services it's a government loan, but it's serviced through that organization, My Great Lakes. So I contacted them and they said, hey, we will reduce your interest rate 0.5 point if you will set up for automatic bank draft. And I said, yeah, let's get it set up on automatic bank draft. During that time, I transitioned into flying jets, and the salary position yet continued to improve. So even though they provide a 6-month grace period before payments were required, I actually contacted them 6 months before graduation. And I said, hey, we can start making payments now. Not big payments, but at the time I set up auto bank draft for $50 a month. And the benefit of that was that we started paying on the loans early, working the debt down, and in exchange, they offered me a lower interest rate. So that's interest payment savings there. During that time, I upgraded to captain. The salary situation improved again, and then we had a job change. Moved from Wisconsin to Savannah, Georgia, to go to work for an aircraft manufacturer, and that position change also came with an additional salary improvement. So things have improved quite a bit since 2014. Things have improved drastically since 2004. So in the end, it's definitely been worth the investment, but it's a long road and it was a big investment. Um, Over the past several months, we got into a position where the minimum payment went up to about $150. So we made the first few minimum payments while we were in transition, in between getting a house sold in Wisconsin, renting here, then eventually buying here. So there was a lot of transition. So we looked at our cash flow and we played it very safe until things started to settle into place. And then we hit a point where things were pretty much settled and we had our budget set. And so we cranked that automatic payment up to $750 a month. So that's what we had been accustomed to paying towards the student loan over the past several months. We're way ahead of schedule. Things were looking really good. And then I got to last month and I got to the day before that 750 automatic bank draft was going to take place. And I looked at it and it was like $2,200 left on the balance. So I said, you know what, let's just pay the thing off, get rid of it and free up that cash flow. And then even though we took a little bit of a hit from our savings account, now we've got $750 a month freed up in our budget that's not going towards that bill. And so that'll quickly replenish the savings hit that we took. So the main takeaway points here is that I've had the opportunity to build this career in aviation all the way from being a certified flight instructor, with no time, starting out with my first 3 students as an intern back in 2004. At the time with $13,000 in student loan debt, until, knocking that out, making the decision to finish up with the 4-year degree, which in turn opened up some doors with better earning, better job, better opportunities. But that came with another round of debt. But thankfully, throughout this whole process, we've been able to keep our debt under control, which is an incredible blessing in this field because, as you know, if you're looking at pilot training, it's very expensive. Some of the estimates today for brand new students starting out going through a 4-year degree program, you're looking at $150,000 to $200,000 worth of total cost. Now, it doesn't mean that will be your total debt load, but it could be. And for anything that you can't pay out of the cash that you hold, or the money that you're going to be earning working side jobs. And those side jobs for me, that's, unless you're doing a second career, you're not making 50, 60, 70 or $100,000. You're making, the money that you can go make in a non-degreed field. All of my work was waiting tables, working at the local store in a retail shop, or doing that type of stuff, working on a farm. I did some of that work as well. So, while I was making money and offsetting the cost, unless you're doing a career change and you've already developed the ability to generate a decent amount of income, then most of the training costs are going to be financed through student loan debt. So I would encourage you to do everything that you can to keep that student loan debt under control. The job opportunities are better than they've ever been, I believe. But pilot training is still extremely expensive, and keeping this debt under control is a number one factor to your long-term financial success as a professional pilot. I've found that to be true. Thankfully, we never stressed over what we felt was crushing debt. But the number of people that are walking away, and I frequently run into, my peers, guys with 4, 5, 6, 7,000 hours, 10 years experience, 15 years experience in the industry, still holding $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in student loan debt. And those are debts that take years to repay. We could get on the student loan calculators. You can just punch in some numbers and look at what $10,000 at a 4% interest rate, I'd say 3 to 5%, whatever the going rates are at the time. And then, look at what percentage of your training cost is going to be covered by subsidized loans versus unsubsidized loans. The subsidized loans for me were about a point to a point and a half lower on the interest rate. And then you can get into the game of, hey, which balance do you pay down first? Which balance do you pay down second? But I've had several friends come to me and say, hey, I'm flying professionally. I've been doing this for years, but it is so liberating to pay that final, check, that final month, get that final, student loan debt paid off. And I've also talked, to the pilots who are frustrated because, they're looking at it and they're like, it's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. So let me encourage you, if you're like me and you've been working, at this for a while, keep hammering away. It'll happen. It took us longer than I had hoped, and that was with a lower debt load than many. But again, that goes back to our family situation and our job situation. If you've got a higher debt load, don't give up. Continue to hammer away at it. But for my target audience, if you are in the process of flight training, study this, use the diligence that you would use if somebody had hired you to run a totally different project. Take that type of mentality and that type of mindset to your situation. If you don't know where you are in the training process in times of hitting milestones along your budget, your timeline, how are you doing? What's this whole thing going to cost? These are questions you should be asking. You should know approximately how much you expect to pay for each stage of training and what the cumulative training overall cost will be. And don't just, have that attitude that, okay, it's training, it's going to be expensive. And, when I get done, then we'll see where we're sitting and then we'll start to dig our way out. Because the differences based on the decisions that you make now could be drastic. It can be a big difference. And the things that you do today really matter. Another thing you can do is give me a call. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to walk through your training strategy, your program, and help you come up with a game plan to keep your cost under control. And, you can come to the website. My phone number is posted. My email address is posted. And that's what we focus on, on AvigationPro.com is helping people, number one, become pilots with the highest level of proficiency, with a reasonable time frame and a reasonable budget. For me, again, big victory. It is awesome to know that it's the 6th and there is not a $750 auto draft that's going to be deducted from my bank account. We've freed up that cash to do something else. For the next few months, it's going to be replenish the savings account. But that is like a breath of fresh air to have that burden lifted. And you can do it too. And I was really excited about this and just thought it would be a great opportunity to put up a video. Please check out my other videos. Check out the website. Give me a call. I'd love to talk to you and help you on your journey. Thank you very much.